Hi, everyone, and welcome. As attendees continue signing on, and before we get things going, we've prepared a poll to better assess your knowledge on today's webinar topic for before and after the webinar. So please take a moment if you haven't already done so and answer those 3 polling questions that have appeared on your screen. And thank you again for joining us on today's webinar titled Closing the Gap Between Health and Gen Z. Okay, let me go back one. Sorry about that. So before we get started, we just want to touch base on some general housekeeping items. So you will all be muted and will be for the duration of the webinar. So if you have any questions, please type them in. Let me just go back 2 slides, I apologize. Please type them into the Q&A box. So we'll have time at the end of the presentation to do some Q&A with both of our speakers. At that time. So throughout the presentation, if you have any questions, use the Q&A box. And information regarding continuing education credits and access to the recording and slide deck will be available at the end of this presentation. We would like to take a minute now to just thank our sponsors, our 2 co-sponsors, the Maryland Academy of Family Physicians and the New Jersey Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics for providing continuing education credits for today's webinar. So again, the recording, slide deck, and credits for physicians, dietitians, and school nurses will be available on americandairy.com about 1 week after this webinar concludes. And again, more details will be available at the end of this webinar as well. All right, so hi everyone, my name is Liz Jalkowitz, and I am one of the health and wellness specialists here at American Dairy Association Northeast. I'm really excited today to be hosting this webinar along with 2 of our presenters, Dr. Brad Bolling and Dietitian Toby Amador, which I will introduce both of them momentarily. So before we get started, I just wanted to give a quick overview for those of you who may not be familiar with American Dairy Association Northeast. We are a nonprofit organization and we represent over 9,000 dairy farm families in our territory, which ranges from New York State, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Delaware, Maryland, Northern Virginia, and DC. We're committed to nutrition education and research-based communications, and we have a long-standing history working with schools to really help increase access to healthy meals, both breakfast and lunch, for children, while also promoting health and wellness through a variety of other programs we offer as well. So at this time, I'd like to introduce both of our speakers for today's presentation, Dr. Brad Bolling and Dietitian Toby Amador. So Dr. Brad Bolling is an associate professor and the Fritz Friday Chair for Vegetable Processing Research in the Department of Food Science at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. He earned his undergraduate and PhD degrees in food science at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. And he received postdoctoral training in nutritional sciences at the Jean Mayer Human Nutrition Research Center on Aging at Tufts University. Dr. Bolling's research is on determining the role of foods and phytochemicals in preventing chronic disease. Dr. Bolling is a scientific editor for the Journal of Food Science. He's an associate editor for nutrition research and chair-elect of the International Society for Nutraceuticals and Functional Foods. He also teaches graduate and undergraduate courses in the Department of Food Science. Our second presenter, Toby Amador, is the founder of Toby Amador Nutrition, where she provides nutrition and food safety consulting services for individuals, restaurants, and food brands. She has published many cookbooks over the years. Her 9th cookbook, Diabetes, Create Your Plate Meal Prep, was just released in April of this year. For over 13 years, she has been the nutrition expert for foodnetwork.com and founding contributor to their Healthy Eats blog. She's also a regular contributor to many national media outlets, such as US News and World Report, Eat and Run blog, and has her own Ask the Expert column in today's Dietitian magazine. She's been quoted in hundreds of publications and appears on local and national television shows like The Dr. Oz Show and CT Style. For 11 years, she was an adjunct professor at Teachers College, Columbia University, teaching food service management, and currently is an adjunct professor at the City University of New York Hunter School of Public Urban Health in New York City. Toby trained as a clinical dietitian at NYU, New York University. And so now I just want to take a quick moment to share our speaker disclosures before we dive into the presentation. And so I won't read them line by line, but I will allow just a few seconds for you all to scan these next 3 slides. So for me, my disclosure is pretty straightforward. I am an employee of the American Dairy Association Northeast. Here are Dr. Brad Bolling's speaker disclosures. And here are Toby Amador's speaker disclosures. Okay. So now to go over the learning objectives for this webinar. During this webinar, health professionals will gain an understanding of the Gen Z consumer segment as it relates to their demographics, behavior, and learning styles, all related to health and wellness. Dr. Brad Bolling will share the latest science and research with attendees as it pertains to health claims supporting immunity, calm, sustained energy, and digestive health, all of which are important topics to Gen Z. And lastly, Toby Amador will show attendees how to best translate the science into consumer-friendly health and wellness messages that can be applied when you're communicating directly with this specific consumer segment, Gen Z. So before I pass it over to Dr. Bolling, I just wanted to take a quick moment to kind of set the stage for this presentation and cover a little bit about who Gen Z is and what we need to know about them as it relates to health and wellness. For Gen Z, feeling good on the inside and out really is the new healthy. So let's dive in and take a closer look. All right, so let's meet Gen Z. There still really is no clear cutoff age for Gen Z, as this generation is still growing. But for today's purposes, we're categorizing Gen Z audience to be between the ages of 10 and 23. And this is based on Pew Research and authority and generational definitions. So depending on maybe the marketing agency that you're looking at, their report, the age difference may vary slightly, like 9 to 22 or 11 to 24. But for today's purposes, we're focusing on 10 to 23. So as you can imagine, this is quite a vast age range with lots of different stages from a growth and developmental perspective, as well as from an educational level, social well-being, and emotional well-being standpoint as well. However, there are a lot of common threads within this consumer segment. For one, I think we can all agree that they are all digital natives, having grown up with some sort of digital device in their hands or Alexa in their house, whether it's a phone, a tablet, a laptop, or other electronic device. So they are the most connected generation growing up with this technology, the internet, and social media right at their disposal, right at their fingertips. And their personalities are generally described as the following: relentless, ambitious, expectant, purpose-driven, and inclusive. And I think for anybody here who knows a Gen Zer, we can agree that these characteristics really do resonate with this generation. So a few additional, important things to know about Gen Z. They are the most racially and ethnically diverse generation to date, which makes them a very open and more accepting of differences amongst their peers when it comes to cultural diversity, especially. So for most, inclusivity and fairness are key values, and they drive much of their purpose, especially when it comes to decision-making at retail. For example, like making specific food or beverage choices for their health and wellness. Alone, their spending power towers over $100 billion. That's a big number. But this doesn't even account for the influence they have on their Gen X and Boomer parents when it comes to purchasing decisions. So they are a very influential consumer segment. They are an anxious generation growing up and living in a pandemic that will forever shape their every aspect of their lives. And they're looking for moments of optimism and escape. And the choices they make around food from a social perspective can help to play into some of these moments with friends and family members. So it's important to note that while it's also important to note that while environment and sustainability is a really important cause that's near and dear to their heart for this generation, there are some other equally important causes for this generation as well, like equality, gender, hunger, and mental wellness and bullying. So those are also important things, important causes for them. So on this slide, I just want to wrap up by highlighting the focus 4, as I'm calling them today. Gen Z, they struggle in different areas of their lives. For example, the Gen Z focus 4. So there's 4 main areas that Gen Z is paying attention to these days when it comes to health and wellness. And this is what we'll be talking about in our webinar today. Making decisions on what to eat or drink as part of their eating patterns. These are the 4 areas we're going to focus on: immunity, calm, sustained energy, and digestive health. So in terms of immunity, this is all about helping protect their overall health, an obvious area of focus for many since the COVID-19 pandemic began. For calm, this is about providing emotional well-being in order to take on their day, bring them back to moments of calm in their life and memories that were shared over a glass of milk. Think milk and cookies or milk and Santa. And then when it comes to sustained energy, this is all about consuming adequate protein intake. So this will help give them the power to get from meal to meal and stay focused mentally and physically throughout the day. When it comes to digestive health, this is all about maintaining a healthy gut and having access to lactose-free options if needed. So for this topic, the focus is mainly on yogurt and probiotics that come with it to help balance and promote a healthy gut. So at this point, now I'd like to pass the presentation off to Dr. Brad Bolling, and he will take a deeper dive into the science and research behind many of these health claims amongst these 4 pillars here, and that are really important to Gen Z. So at this point, Dr. Bolling, I'd like to pass the presentation off to you.
Thanks, Liz. Very happy to be here and present on this topic today. To start off, we do have a poll, and this is just to get us all oriented to how foods might affect us in different ways. And so the poll we have up here, if you could please take a second and complete that, is a simple question: which of these foods would change the way that you feel? Coffee, prunes, chocolate cake, or all of those? Maybe you had one or all of these for breakfast today, I don't know. But we all choose foods for different reasons. We have go-to foods for certain functional benefits here. We may eat some of these foods at certain times of the day. Conversely, we may not want to eat these foods for specific reasons. Everyone has their own unique reasons for eating foods. While we're finishing up this poll, I'll just give you a brief overview of the structure of my talk here. First, we'll talk a little bit more about why we eat foods. Then I'll focus on eating foods for health benefits and the current recommendations for healthy diets. Then I'll talk more about food quality, both from a nutritional perspective, and then also get into more about the bioactive components of foods. And I'll talk about how gut is important for the immune health and links to overall health. And then for the balance of the talk, I'll introduce some of the research that we have from our group on this topic. All right, so we have the poll results. Majority are saying all of those would change the way you feel. Yeah, I'm sure we all, or some, only one of these would choose the way you feel. I mean, probably everyone recognizes, coffee will change our energy level, right? Or our ability to focus. Prunes may impact our digestive health, or perhaps bone health, if you're thinking about that. Chocolate cake, although it's indulgent, that affects our mood and maybe our happiness and our sense of well-being. So thanks for sharing your thoughts here on this. And yeah, being in the field of food science, we think a lot about why people eat food. And really, when you survey consumers, cost and taste, these are kind of the main reasons when someone is out shopping and selecting foods, why they're going to pick something. However, sustainability is something that's becoming more and more important for consumers. We also, lump in like the familiarity that someone may have with a certain food type. They're comfortable eating that food. Others may have ethical reasons for choosing certain foods or certain dietary patterns. Then also the fun and pleasure is a very important reason for eating food as well. And then for health, I'd like to break this down into many different types of subtopics. There's the basic nutritional benefits and nutritional reasons why we eat foods, to provide energy, to help growth. Some are also eating as a form of stress reduction. Eating a certain way to promote weight loss. Some may be concerned about immune health or gut health, which will be the focus of my talk today. Then disease management. So maybe someone has a chronic disease that they're trying to manage, or maybe they're at increased risk of chronic disease for whatever reason. Others may have food allergies and need to eat a certain way to make sure that they're healthy. So really many different ways and many different dimensions of why we eat foods, and the importance may be highly individualized. When we look at eating for health, there are recommended dietary patterns which have been established based on scientific consensus. So the 2020 to 2025 dietary guidelines for Americans is our current iterations of this. And if you look at those dietary guidelines, they recommend several different types of diets that are consistent with healthy dietary patterns. So these include a US style dietary pattern, Mediterranean style dietary pattern, and vegetarian diet as well. We also have the DASH diet, dietary approaches to stop hypertension, that's well known there. And in these dietary guidelines, they're really focused on reducing chronic disease risk, and adhering to these types of healthy dietary patterns are associated with reduced risk of heart disease, diabetes, lower risk of certain forms of cancer, and lower risk of obesity, and lower risk of hip fracture. Other types of messaging that you may see related to diets and health are Fda Food Claims, and these are claims that you would see advertised on product packaging. These are about reducing the risk of chronic disease, importantly in healthy individuals. So, increased risks of, or increased consumption of fruits and vegetables may reduce the risk of heart disease. That's an example of one of these types of label claims that are out there. When we look at patterns and adherence to these types of healthy dietary patterns, here's a chart from the dietary guidelines that illustrates that really the younger types of consumers, especially in the age 9 to 18 years old, are among the consumers with the poorest types of healthy eating patterns. And it's important to realize that we need to focus on this age range to increase the nutritional quality of their diets. When we look at specifically the types of foods that can be, and the types of dietary patterns that can be improved here, increasing fruits, vegetable, whole grain types of consumption, increasing dairy consumption. These are some of the main reasons why the dietary quality falls short on this. And these types of foods provide those underconsumed nutrients of concern: potassium, dietary fiber, choline, magnesium, calcium, vitamin A, vitamin D, vitamin E, vitamin C, and iron, especially for adolescent girls and women 19 to 50 years old. And when we select those types of nutrient dense foods, they're going to be great sources of macronutrients and micronutrients. So macronutrients are the lipids, proteins, carbohydrates present in those foods. Micronutrients include the vitamins and minerals that are at lower levels, but very important for our nutritional health. Then we have this whole class of bioactive types of compounds. These bioactives are not established nutrients as we are recognized, but they may be these other components such as caffeine in coffee, the flavanols in chocolate, the polyphenols in prunes, and the lycopene or carotenoids in tomatoes and other types of plants. Now, all of these, when isolated, these particular types of compounds have promising actions for impacting health, but they're part of the total package of what these foods deliver. Dairy products also have bioactives. In addition to being a good source of nutrients, we have specific whey proteins, bioactive peptides, bioactive proteins, polar lipid molecules in milk that are important to conferring their health benefits. And then when we get into cultured types of foods, not only the cultures that are added during the processing, but the metabolites and the peptides produced by those fermenting microorganisms. Also, the microorganisms may secrete metabolites such as exopolysaccharides that change the way the foods behave from a textural perspective, but also may have health effects as well. So when we eat, the food transits our gastrointestinal system, and the gut is really an important component of the immune system. Just to kind of get us on the same page about the biology and the immunology here, the gut barrier, when we're looking at the intestine, is composed of these enterocytes. These are held together or linked together by tight junctions. There's an immune compartment associated with that in the lamina propria, and separating the gut microbiota and the food that's transiting that lumen is a thick barrier of mucus, and the nutrients are absorbed, and the food matrix is broken down during transit there. It's importantly recognized that this immune compartment is a very important site for development of these cells and the actions of nutrients. And some of the key biomarkers that we measure when we're thinking about inflammation and immune function and immunity, such as the C-reactive protein, TNF alpha, or some of the cytokines such as the IL-6 or IL-10. These may be derived from some of these cells that differentiate in the gut and then enter into circulation as well, in addition to the tissues here. And now these nutrients and bioactives are digested and absorbed in the gut, and they interface there with the intestinal immune system here. And the intestinal immune system is very complex, but we see that these types of dietary components can affect the immune system either by direct or indirect actions. So what I mean here by a direct action is, maybe that lycopene from tomato interacts directly with an immune cell and starts to inhibit the ability of that cell to produce pro-inflammatory cytokines, or maybe it's having an antioxidant type of effect directly on the cell. From an indirect perspective, the dietary components and bioactives can affect the gut microbiota. So it can change the type of metabolites that are being produced by the bacteria, but also change the structure of the microbiome as well. And this is important for how cells develop in the gut. And my group is very interested in the Th17 types of cells, which are present at the mucosal interface. And we see that diet can drive these cells either into a more regulatory state, or perhaps a more activated state, depending upon the disease and the conditions and the timing of the bioactive intake here. And beyond the gut, those metabolites and the bioactives that are produced in response to interacting with the gut microbiome, they interface with the rest of the immune system, the brain, the liver, the lungs, the oral cavity. I mean, really many other types of actions or secondary actions that these types of metabolites can have. Just want to highlight some of these on this graph here. Maybe you're aware of the short chain fatty acids, as we have in the upper left. These are important for maintaining enterocyte health and also play a role in regulating the immune system. Other areas are tryptophan metabolites produced by the gut microbiota or present in foods as well, interacting with the immune system. And there's really a body of emerging research to show that microbial metabolites are involved in the pathogenesis of many chronic diseases. So things like IBD, diabetes, rheumatoid arthritis, lupus, cardiovascular disease, cancer. Really, many diseases are thought to be related in part to the upregulation, downregulation, or absence of some of these metabolites. Part of the talk today is about calming, and when we think about the gut, it also interfaces with the brain, and this type of axis has been called the gut-brain axis. So the gut microbiota may be producing metabolites that are neuroactive. Those immune cells that differentiate in the gut are producing cytokines and actually transiting the rest of the body and have the potential to impact the brain. The Th17 cells are one of those cells which may differentiate in response to signals from the gut and then migrate to the brain. And the gut microbiota is really important for the not only immune health, but the risk of chronic disease as well. However, our understanding is not as granular as maybe some of these more direct actions. But I mean, really every month there's a new and really fascinating study that's released on how individualized the gut microbiome is and the importance of this in chronic disease. So I just want to highlight one here from the PREDICT study. They try to link the specific microbial composition of individuals, their dietary patterns, and their dietary response to nutrients here. And really, we're learning more and more from these types of studies. So genetics, cohabitation, diet, age, environment, the health history, all these impact the gut microbiome. From this particular studies, they found that microbial species segregate into groups associated with more and less healthy plant and animal-based foods. So we see that the microbiome aligns with these types of dietary patterns. There's the distinct microbial signatures that can differentiate between positive and negative metabolic health indices when we look at these at fasting conditions. And things like obesity have predictable microbial indicators that are consistent across microbial populations. But still, some of the strongest microbiome habitual diet associations are driven by poorly characterized microbes. So we still have a lot to learn about this area of how microbiome affects immune health. And when we're thinking about dairy and gut health, I think there are these misconceptions that I hear from consumers and others. And there's this perspective that dairy is pro-inflammatory or dairy is bad for the gut health. So I just want to address that and then talk a little bit about my research in this area. There's been a number of systematic reviews conducted on this topic of dairy consumption and inflammation. And here I've highlighted 3 recent studies in here if you want to look more into this. All of these studies, point out that when we look at randomized control trials on milk, cheese, yogurt, isolated dairy proteins, they tend to have either neutral effects or be modestly effective at reducing chronic inflammation, particularly for fermented foods and benefits. The pro-inflammatory results that have been seen have largely been from studies where they're studying food allergies, not necessarily from healthy individuals or subjects with metabolic disorders where dairy may be beneficial for those types of consumers. So the body of literature is consistent that dairy foods are not pro-inflammatory for consumers here. So my group is very interested in this idea that fermented foods and specifically yogurt can reduce biomarkers of chronic inflammation, potentially through these gut health mediated mechanisms. And we set out to investigate chronic inflammation in both obese and non-obese women. We ran a parallel type of study design, and it's a little bit complex. So we have one group that's consuming yogurt. It's a low-fat, sweetened yogurt, and then we have a control snack which is balanced for macronutrient present in the yogurt. At the beginning and the end of that study, we pursued postprandial challenge meals where we can investigate the impact of pre-meal consumption of yogurt or the control food on markers of metabolic health and markers of gut health here. So when we look at the type of foods that we give to induce a metabolic type of dysfunction, this is actually a standardized type of intervention in the field. We give a high-fat, high-calorie meal, so that's 960 kilocalories after consuming 8 ounces of yogurt or the control snack. It takes about 15 to 20 minutes to complete that meal, and then we take blood draws to investigate inflammation and the biomarkers of gut health after consuming yogurt or the control food in advance of that meal. And we see for obese and non-obese that the pre-meal yogurt consumption before this high-fat, high-calorie challenge meal benefits markers of gut health and reduces biomarkers of inflammation. So on this top chart here, we have the change in LPS binding protein and soluble CD14 ratio. This is a marker of response to endotoxin. So we see that yogurt is preventing that after meal increase in a marker of barrier dysfunction. And then we see that the yogurt consumption also prevents that rise in postprandial IL-6, which is a pro-inflammatory cytokine. We also investigated glucose. We are missing some important time points between 0 and 1 hour, but in the group with obesity, we see that after 1 hour after that meal, the glucose is still elevated, but yogurt prevents that rise. And we see in the non-obese participants, the yogurt prevents the hypoglycemia experienced after this type of large meal. And we also looked at what happens 9 weeks after consistent consumption of the 12 ounces of yogurt. We see that the soluble CD14, which was the primary marker of our study, or the primary outcome of our study, was unchanged between the diet or the intervention arm of this study. We do see reductions in some of the biomarkers related to these gut barrier functions. So the LBP soluble CD14 ratio is improved by yogurt consumption in obese and non-obese individuals. And then another marker for how the antibodies interact with LPS is also improved, the EndoCAB score. We did not see any changes in fasting IL-6 or C-reactive protein, but we did see a reduction in TNF-alpha to soluble TNFR2 ratio modestly in both the yogurt consuming arms relative to the control. Our group is very interested in what are the benefits of yogurt in the gut. So one of the ways that we're studying this is using a cell culture model to investigate this. And these types of cultured cells are called CACO2 cells that we use in the lab. And you can see in this upper left panel here, the cells grow up in these transwell inserts, and we can add an inflammatory cocktail to compromise the barrier function because of the presence of those cytokines. The green proteins here marked in our 3D models here are those tight junctions that are important for creating that healthy barrier. And when we apply that inflammatory cocktails, you can see in this green chart here in the upper right, the barrier function is reduced. When we add yogurt at the same time as that inflammatory cocktail, we see that prevents that type of barrier dysfunction in these cells. And we can see here over the time, we have a time course up to 48 hours where that's incubated with the yogurt. And we see when we stain for the tight junction proteins, that seems consistent with that protection, is that the yogurt prevents that loss of tight junction proteins induced by the inflammatory barriers you can see from these microscopic images here. Our group is also pursuing more targeted studies. We want to investigate the T regulatory Th17 cells. We have a trial in progress here to look at that and relate yogurt consumption to changes in gut microbiota and these types of cells and microbial metabolites. We're also pursuing mechanistic studies, so trying to understand what types of bioactive metabolites are driving these types of change. This is really a complex area because there are many different types of yogurts or fermented foods that can be, the cultures can have a big impact on that, and the digestion of that is also important. And we're investigating that, how the diet changes the LPS binding protein. That seems to be an important part of the story here. So I want to wrap up this talk here and just, hopefully I've convinced you that the gut mediates the beneficial actions of nutrients and bioactives. And diet is very important for immune health, but we need more information on the specific mechanisms from specific foods. And we don't have the totality of that evidence yet. But we can lean back on what we know those helpful dietary patterns are, which include dairy. And as I've tried to demonstrate from our studies with yogurt, foods can modestly reduce the biomarkers of inflammation. But one caveat to this is that we still need to do more work to relate this to chronic disease risk. So with that, I want to acknowledge the sources of support for this research and incredible research team we have here, and turn the talk over to Toby.
Thank you so much. That was very interesting information, Dr. Bolling. I actually started pushing it out on my social, all the amazing messages you have, but I'm actually going to go into part 2 here and talk about sharing science-based messages with Gen Z clients. And you're going to see a lot of handouts, a lot of information that you can utilize with your clients as I go through those 4 pillars that Liz mentions at the beginning. And there will be a handout provided for everyone with all links to all these different recipes and handouts. So let's get started. So first of all, focusing on Gen Z pays off. Just to start with some statistics, brands that make the connection with this remarkable generation drive on average 14 times greater dollar growth opportunity versus other generations. So that is some staggering statistics I wanted to share. All right, so going into that first pillar, I'm going to talk about immunity and getting the messages across to the Gen Z, which I realize all my 3 children are Gen Z. So a lot of this does resonate when I speak to them. So immunity, like we had mentioned, is something that is certainly top of mind, especially with the pandemic and for Gen Z in particular. So consumers, specifically Gen Z consumers, are looking for food and supplements. So they are looking at both to help improve strength and immunity. So we've seen social media. We know Gen Z goes to social media, specifically TikTok, for example. And some of these fads are starting to come out. I've written and I debunked many of these. So like, for example, garlic clove, put it up your nostril and that'll help alleviate your colds and clear your sinuses. So clearly that is not true. And it actually can lead to the garlic getting stuck in the nostril and you having to go to the ER, which has happened to people. Chlorophyll in the water, you put some drops to help stimulate the immune system. Again, that has been debunked. And then steeping lettuce in water as a sleep aid, that actually stems about because there is a in vivo, in the test tube, a study just basically showing that there are components in romaine lettuce specifically that may enable, that work within the metabolism of sleep. However, it's been they jumped from like this one little study that's showing it in a test tube, and then they jumped like, oh no, I can now eat lettuce and it'll be a sleep aid. So there's a lot of misconceptions and misinformation that we are seeing on social media. So discussing immunity with Gen Z clients. So I did write the Family Immunity Cookbook. It actually just won the Gourmand Award last week. And it's really, what I do is it's food first. And that was really important to me. And it really talks about an overall healthy diet. And you can see the picture is half your plate, fruit and vegetables, just like my plate. Then you have a quarter of it with protein, lean protein, and a quarter with starches. So utilizing food first and utilizing those nutrients. And I do have a list of 25 foods that I put in the Family Immunity Cookbook, though I do also write in my head notes, it's not just one food. Let's say strawberries is in there or yogurt is in there, but it is, milk can help too, because it has a tremendous amount of nutrients. So I do expand on that as well. So it's many more than 25 foods. So for example, zinc helps with wound healing, and selenium helps protect the body from chronic inflammation and infection. Whereas yogurt is one of my 25 foods that I do highlight, has the probiotics, which can help keep that immune system healthy. So just relating this type of information to Gen Zers, helps them understand a little bit better the immunity. Those are the types of messaging that they do want. All right. And milk does have 13 essential nutrients. And I showed you this handout again. You will get a link to this handout, but it shows each nutrient. Let's say calcium has 25% of your daily value in a glass of milk and 1 cup of milk, and it helps build and maintain strong bones and teeth. So it gives purpose for the body and immunity for the Gen Zers, that's what they're searching for. And as we know, this is from the 2020-2025 Dietary Guidelines for Americans. We know that most Americans are falling short on dairy, on fruits and vegetable recommendations, even on whole grain recommendations. But you can see fruits, about 80% are not meeting the daily recommended servings per day. Total vegetable, it's about 90%, and dairy as well. Most folks are not meeting the 3 daily servings of dairy every day. And looking at dairy foods and immune support and the nutrients found in dairy foods, you can see in this slide, it's really interesting to see milk, yogurt, and cheese. And you can see important immunity nutrients found in all kinds of foods, a lot of them in milk, cheese, and yogurt. So protein, selenium, a bunch of the vitamins, A, B, 6, C, D, and E. And so it is found, yes, in milk, cheese, and yogurt, but it's also found in plant-based foods as well. And you can see all the nutrients kind of spread out throughout the different foods, the milk, cheese, and yogurt over here. And that kind of brings me on to plant-based. What exactly is plant-based? Because there are a lot of questions that do come up with the Gen Z population. I've had this conversation with my own children, but there's no formal, we have to remember this, from a professional standpoint, there is no formal definition to plant-based. You might hear health professionals describe this term various ways, including strict vegan eating, a vegetarian diet, a diet that includes some animal food. So already there, it's very confusing because it's all over the gamut. It's been described as flexitarian or plant forward. Again, there's no formal definition. And with one person saying, oh, no, it's vegan. No, no, it's vegetarian. Oh, no, you could have some animal foods. It really confuses individuals, specifically this Gen Z population. So I wanted to showcase this study from Nutrients that talks about how to complement, basically how milk and dairy foods do complement plant-based foods. So it's not putting one versus the other, but rather one plus the other. So milk and dairy plus the plant foods. And so in this modeling scenario, they used the NHANES modeling study with over 17,000 subjects, which were 2 years and older. So they doubled the usual consumed plant-based foods. And when they doubled how much plant-based foods they usually consumed, they did find improved intakes of magnesium, iron, and vitamin C and E. But they still found insufficient intakes of calcium, vitamin D, vitamin A, and protein. And we know from the 2020-2025 dietary guidelines that both calcium and vitamin D are underconsumed nutrients by all Americans in every age group and every part of the life cycle. So when you looked at a group in this modeling scenario and they doubled the milk, cheese, and yogurt, they actually improved intakes of the three over here that when they doubled the plant foods were still insufficient. So you can see it's not just one or the other, but rather the complementary plant plus animal foods, or plus yogurt and milk in this case. So specific, this is what was the researchers concluded, specific recommendations to increase low-fat and non-fat dairy foods in conjunction to increasing healthy plant-based foods will help to close some of the nutrient gaps currently present among Americans of all ages. And Gen Z does very, very well with imagery of recipes. So this is from my immunity cookbook, 2 of them. So this is a strawberry kiwi almond yogurt bark and a green tea smoothie bowl with raspberries. Again, you can see the complement of both the milk, cheese, and yogurt group alongside plants. If you haven't seen this website before, I highly recommend you go to it. savorrecipes.com has a tremendous amount of recipes. And so this one is green smoothie bowl. And of course it has dairy in it as well, and a chocolate raspberry smoothie bowl, which looks delicious. Again, you have the yogurt in there or milk in there, and then you have the plant-based foods. And these are handouts from the American Dairy Association Northeast, and they're really nice that showcase the exact thing I'm talking about. So, you know, if you want the smoothie, it's not just, you know, only fruit, but you're mixing it up either with fruits, you can mix in a veggie, your protein, so you're plant and animal together. Same thing with the grain bowl, and it teaches you step by step, or the Gen Z, or it's really nice education tool, how to build step by step your grain bowl or salad by using both your plants plus animal or dairy. And on the Undeniably Dairy site, you can find also, I liked this article specifically on immunity, can dairy boost the immune system? And it gives a really basic explanation, but good explanation. And also it links to YouTube video. We do know that Gen Zers do like to get information online, and they especially like watching videos. But it's not only food. Lifestyle factors also can help contribute to stress and also affect immunity. So this is another key point that you can make with Gen Zers. So it's hydration. So mild dehydration can affect mood or increase even stress or anxiety. And so keeping hydrated and the types of beverages to keep hydrated on is important education point. Proper sleep, which is also of concern to Gen Zers. Poor sleep is linked to reduced psychological well-being. A lot of times too, poor sleep can cause you to overeat if that's a concern. Regular exercise can help increase those feel-good hormones. Alcohol in moderation, 1 to 2 drinks per day, 1 per day max if you choose to drink for a woman and 2 for a man per the 2020-2025 dietary guidelines. And overconsumption can hinder the immune system. And then in my specific cookbook on the immunity cookbook, the family immunity cookbook, I do talk about managing stress in the kitchen. So talking about how you can meal prep. You don't have to meal prep 30 recipes, but even doing a couple recipes over the weekend to help get through the week can certainly help reduce stress. Planning meals, putting some meals in the freezer in advance so you can always pull something out if you're in a rush, and then one-pot meals. And of course, if there is stress, to always recommend seeking professional help. The second pillar is calm. And here's some messaging that can work with Gen Zers about keep feelings of calm. And you really you'll see how simplistic these messages are, but they're very effective with this population. When life has you stressed, reset yourself with dairy. It's simple nutrition is good for your body. Create a moment of calm in the morning with milk. It's delicious and good for your body. Wind down after a long day and reset yourself with dairy. It's good for the body and tastes great. So very simplistic messaging that it's good for keeping calm. It's good for your body. It's good. The taste is there. And I want to go through in terms of milk and calm, drinking that warm glass of milk, or to me, I like the hot cocoa made with milk before bed. Now, there's not much research, very little peer-reviewed nutrition research about this. However, we do know that it's part of a lot of people's routine, and they really do enjoy it, and it helps them as part of their routine unwind and de-stress. So for some people, having that warm beverage at night, whether it's warm milk in a cup of decaf tea or coffee or golden milk, that can certainly be part of what they do at night. There's also Gen Zers are gaga over moon milk. So this is one company that sells the moon milk, and the moon milk is actually mixed. It's the milk combined with very hibiscus or different types of adaptogens to help with relaxation. Turmeric is the yellow one. So it helps promote well-being and relaxation. But you can also make your own moon milk, which is really fun. And savorrecipes.com has that information and I just pulled 2 recipes, but there were many of them and they're beautiful. Look at the blue for this blue moon milk on the right, the magic of moon milk for restful sleep. We'll also give you some information about it. It's great. So those are also some wonderful resources. The Savor Recipes website also has several education handouts. On the left, you'll see unwind time, so do's and don'ts of what you should do before you unwind for bed. And on the right, grocery shopping guide with a list of some foods that you can eat before bedtime that might help you. So those are 2 educational handouts that are available to you. With protein and sustained energy, the next pillar, here's some simple messaging for Gen Zers. Milk helps you fuel up without the crash. It's a simple, easy source of protein when you need to stay energized. A lot of Gen Zers don't realize that there is quite a bit of protein in a glass of milk. Dragging, take a moment, reset yourself with dairy and keep going. And the third bullet, it says, get after it with dairy. As a natural source of protein, dairy provides the pick-me-up you need to go all out. So those are just a couple of messaging for Gen Zers. And again, the recipes, the imagery really, they really take to it, Gen Zers. So here's some protein-rich dinners. Mansaf, which is a lamb stewed in yogurt. So that's one. Or you have here cheesy poblano asada tacos. So I know that like in my house, any kind of Mexican fare always does really well with my Gen Zer kids. A spaghetti squash casserole, and then there's a Philly cheesesteak skewer. So you have all flavors, a lot of, you know, variety in the different dishes on savorrecipes.com. The last one is digestive health, certainly of concern to Gen Zers. They value gut health and all things promoting gut health. They're willing to try any and all products that feature this health claim, which, you know, there might be opportunity there for debunking some myths or providing or promoting a healthier product or yogurt. You know, something that's fermented with good bacteria or probiotics. So definitely things to look out for with Gen Zers. Here's the simple messaging with digestive health and Gen Z. Be good to your digestive system. Yogurt is linked to better digestion, and a healthy immune system. Being comfortable makes you feel better and perform better. Grab yogurt before your next activity. It's linked to better digestive health. Yogurt is linked to improved digestive health, so reset yourself and show your gut some love when you start your day with yogurt. Okay. Lactose intolerance is another gut health issue that certainly Gen Zers are questioning and talking about. So just to give you the definition, lactose intolerance is defined as GI, gastrointestinal disturbances that may be experienced following intake of an amount of lactose greater than the body's ability to absorb it. Common symptoms, so you've heard of them: gas, flatulence, bloating, abdominal pain, diarrhea. But the symptoms following lactose consumption can certainly vary based on different things going on in your body. So level of lactase enzyme activity, gastric emptying rates, fecal bacterial metabolites, the intestinal transit time. And then we have to remember the severity of lactose intolerant discomfort. To me, if my stomach hurts or I have very bad gas, I'm rating it like a 9 or 10 on that 0 to 10 scale. That perception of abdominal pain varies based on the individual. Remember, there's going to be a psychological impact of pain and perceived social discomfort. If someone's having food in a party that has lactose in it and they're perceiving they're going to be in pain and they're going to have to run to the restroom and be embarrassed, they may not consume it. So those are just things to think about. So recommendation for management: the National Institute of Health, their expert panel suggests that adults and adolescents diagnosed with lactose intolerance, they can tolerate about 12 grams of lactose in one sitting. That's a cup of milk or yogurt. That doesn't mean that someone with lactose intolerance should right now go drink a glass of milk or have, you know, a cup of yogurt. It should be, and I'll give you some of the tips, built up over time. Some people tolerate one thing better than the other, so it's very individual. The National Medical Association and the National Institute of Health expert panel, they do recommend that people with lactose intolerance do keep dairy foods in their diet, just because they are so nutrient rich. So just to give you, this is, you'll get the handouts, a chart of the amount of lactose in common dairy foods, because not all dairy foods have the same amount. And so you want to start a lot of times with lower lactose foods. They might actually be tolerated better. So any lactose-free anything, doesn't matter, the fat content will always have 0 grams. Cheeses, you can see 1 ounce of Swiss, cheddar, mozzarella, less than 0.1 grams of lactose, so very little. American cheese, 1 ounce has 1 gram of lactose. A half a cup of cottage cheese has 3 grams. The Greek style yogurt has 4 grams. Butter has very little, 0.01. And if you want to talk about any kind of milk, they all have the same at 12 grams. Remember, yogurt and Greek yogurt also have those live active cultures to help with the lactose digestion. Strategies for dietary management of lactose intolerance. So I love this. You can make into a handout, slice it. You can use, remember the cheese is low in lactose, so top sandwiches or crackers with some natural cheese. Shred it. You can shred a little bit of cheese onto veggies, pastas, salads, or soups. Spoon it, whether it's Greek, plain, flavored. The live active cultures can help with the lactose digestion. Try it, opt for a lactose-free dairy and milk products. Sip it, start small. So whatever form of milk or dairy product they want, start with small amounts and slowly, as they're comfortable, increase it over time. And stirring it in, like in the photo on the top right, when you mix milk and dairy with other foods, it actually helps slow the digestion and allows the body more time to digest the lactose. There are a variety of lactose-free dairy products out there, from milk, all kinds of fat contents, ice cream, cheese, yogurt, eggnog. So there's a ton, you just have to read the labels. And I always get this question, how is lactose-free dairy milk made? So this is a milking parlor that I visited, and it's the natural lactase enzyme is added into it to help break down the lactose. If you remember your science, lactose is a disaccharide, so it's two sugars connected, and so you have to break it down. The enzyme puts it into its monosaccharide components, glucose and galactose. And because it's in its monosaccharide components, you might taste it and feel that it has a slightly sweeter taste. It actually does. It should be noted that lactose-free is not dairy-free. So if someone has a dairy allergy, lactose-free is not for them. So that is a question that I get as well. But lactose-free does have the same 13 essential nutrients as traditional cow's milk that's not lactose-free. So here's actually a milking parlor. And it cooks just like cow's milk in puddings and oatmeal. So again, lactose intolerant friendly dairy foods. I showed you that chart with the varying levels of lactose. And so it's very individual how, which food someone can tolerate better, and building up small amounts over time. So of course, talking about lactose intolerant friendly foods, these are from my first cookbook, The Greek Yogurt Kitchen. Lemon blueberry stuffed French toast. So I have a lemon yogurt, and then I smashed some fresh blueberries, and it's in between two pieces of French toast, challah French toast. A salad parfait, really fun to serve because look how pretty it is. And then you have a layer of herbs with plain Greek yogurt. And then here's a baked artichoke dip, and I put some fontina. You can put another cheese. I chose fontina cheese. I thought it complemented the artichokes really nicely. So we're going to do the second polling question right now. Which 3 nutrients found in milk are considered underconsumed by Americans? So please choose one of the 4. And just as a reminder that the handouts that I am talking about, all the recipes that I'm talking about, they will be emailed to you. So the recipes, handouts, all be emailed to you. All right, so we're ready to see the answer to this polling question. Oh, we're still getting some answers in there, so keep, putting in your answer. Going to get as many people as possible to answer the question. See how well you guys did. All right. It's coming up, the answers. So vitamin D, potassium, and calcium, which is the correct answer. About 2/3 of everybody did get that. Wonderful. just to give you dietary guidelines in dairy, all the recommendations for various age groups are on the right. But I do want to point out this comes directly from the 2020-2025 dietary guidelines. For individuals who choose dairy alternatives, fortified soy beverage or soy milk and soy yogurt, which are fortified with calcium, vitamins A and D, are included as part of the dairy group because they're similar to milk and yogurt based on nutrient composition and in their use in meals. So other beverages, and the dietary guidelines actually names them. They talk about hemp and oat and almond, plant-based beverages. Those don't count as part of your 3 servings of dairy that are recommended daily. If you choose to drink them, let's say you want it in coffee, that's fine. It's a beverage, but you would still need to get the nutrients that your body needs for the day, those 3 servings of milk or dairy foods, or it could be a plant-based beverage in there. And then just putting everything together and targeting Gen Z. Okay, just to remember, summing it all up. Gen Z, they are digital natives consuming media differently than other targets. These channel insights will lead us to different tactics and platforms to reach them. Okay, so they're informed, just not through print. They consume fewer newspapers and magazines than the general population. I don't know about you, but I'm not Gen Zer. I love my magazines on an airplane. So Gen Zers, they do get their information through the internet and social media, spending more time than any other generation before them. So about 40 hours per week on the internet and 23.3 hours for social media. And they can toggle through online on IRL. So we need to think about reaching them in the same way. So here's how we reach them, okay? And remember our messages that we talked about, our 4 pillars: immunity, calm, sustained energy, protein, and digestive health. So Gen Z prefer TikTok and Instagram over the millennials, Facebook and Pinterest. Convenience is first. They want to have their messages like yesterday, like in a second. They don't want to wait. Gaming, Gen Z love YouTube gaming and Twitch more than any other generation. The video is on demand. They want to watch their TV when it's best for them. And their music and audio, Gen Z preferred to stream music online, like through Spotify, SoundCloud, or Tidal. I know that my teens who are Gen Zers definitely got me involved in Spotify, but I have no idea how to set it up, so I made them do it for me. They were happy to do it. So how to communicate with Gen Z, one of the most relevant and authentic ways is through social media influencers. Stats show that more than half of Gen Z and millennials admit to purchasing a product they saw an influencer talking about. So this is a good opportunity also to talk about which type of messaging or influencers that they're seeing have good information, reputable information. And so giving a list out to them too is very important. Okay, so how to communicate: lead with emotion first and logic second. Use their voice, not ours. Think about multicultural diversity. Has to be in the lens for everything. And best way to their heart is through their stomachs. That's why there were so many food and recipe pictures. And remember, video, apps, and gaming all work with them. All right, so that's what I have for you today. And all 3 of us will be taking questions now.
Thank you, Toby. Thank you, Dr. Bolling. What an incredible presentation from both of you. We really appreciate your insights and your knowledge. And I hope that everyone on the webinar today that participated can really feel more confident in communicating with Gen Z as it relates to their health and wellness. So at this point, we will now open it up for any questions that attendees have. And I will say that questions have been rolling in. So we do have some already lined up. However, as we're going through them, we'll answer as many as we can in the time that we have. And if we don't get to any that are, pressing questions, we can include a little Q&A in the post-webinar email communications to address those questions. So, all right, so let's get started here. So Dr. Bolling, one question came in for you regarding someone wanting to know, was all of your research conducted, done with Gen Z subjects, or can you kind of talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so in the studies that we performed with the yogurt, where we were showing the effects when you eat yogurt before the meal, and then the biomarkers after, those were conducted in adults aged 21 to 55. They skewed on the younger age because we're recruiting from a campus here. So the age range of those groups were probably just a little bit above that Gen Z cutoff. So they range from like 24 to 30-ish in the average age of the participants in those categories. It's a good point. You know, what age are you conducting the research in, and what models?
Sure.
And you know, it's essential, but we don't have the luxury of a lot of studies kind of comparing those different age ranges. But I would suggest, you know, we know that diet is really important during the development of immune cell functions, and some of those early differentiation events occur kind of on the younger spectrum there. So I would, you know, maybe say that, you know, we can't directly infer from our studies, but it's really important to consume a healthy dietary pattern at that younger age, for sure.
Absolutely. Yeah, that was a great question from the attendee. And Toby, this one's for you. Somebody asked, are Gen Zers more or less likely to be open to like a food first approach to acquire these, you know, health benefits from nutrients? And a part two was like, well, what are their views about supplements? And I feel like your presentation kind of went one way over the other, but I would love to hear your thoughts on that.
Sure. I've actually given some presentations where I talk about the supplements, and my column in today's Dietitian magazine actually does talk about, I have numerous columns that talk about a variety of immunity supplements specifically, or to help with anxiety, because that's certainly a concern with Gen Zers. I think it's important to realize that a lot of these adaptogenic type of supplements also have side effects and interactions with a variety of different medications, and really looking at, you know, trying to talk to them and say, you know, let's look at what you're eating first, you know, and then we can tackle those second, but really focusing on that food first application. And I think a lot of individuals, specifically Gen Zers, they hear, oh my gosh, this is good for this stress or that, and then they forget, hey, I have to eat every day and there are things I'm putting in my body. Why am I not looking at that first? So kind of doing it in that simplistic perspective certainly helps. And I know even with my own kids, they've come to me and said, oh, can I try this? You know, all my friends are trying it. And I'm like, you know, why don't we see what you're eating today? And, you know, so sometimes it's just changing that perspective around, and the dietetic professional or health professional in general can certainly help do that.
Yeah, and I would just add to that, if there's like a TikTok challenge or something out there promoting a certain food or nutrient, I mean, you can bet that these Gen Zers will be all over it and will know what's going on in terms of the trends there. Will it, you know, be maybe the most nutritious? Not always, but I think that, you know, if we can get ahead in front of them with that proper evidence-based nutrition information on those platforms, they will eat it up, no pun intended. So I guess we have time for one last question here, and I'm gonna, you know, throw it to both of you, whoever wants to respond, or both. Somebody asked, does the fat content of milk impact the inflammatory response? And I thought this was a really interesting question. You know, we know that the nutrients in dairy foods that play an important role in immunity are vitamin A, vitamin D, protein, zinc, selenium. So I would just like to kind of throw that out to you guys if you have anything to add to that question on how does the fat content of milk impact the inflammatory response? That's a great question.
I can take the first answer on this. So that was a great perspective on the nutrients, and yeah, that's really important to consider for, you know, the nutritional quality is going to be good for or excellent for a high I guess a full fat and normal fat type of milk or dairy product there. In terms of the bioactives, there are some important fat soluble bioactives that are not nutrients. So in the milk fat globule membrane, there's both sphingolipids and polar lipids, and the direct immune effects of those are an area of active investigation. I think, you know, there's some ongoing human intervention studies that should shed some light on this specific benefits of those components in the fat fraction of milk. but it's there's still more work to do on that. In reviewing the clinical literature, some of those summary reviews did try to bin studies into what type of dairy products were being used, and they did not see that the whole fat dairy products were more pro-inflammatory. It's kind of similar types of responses to the reduced fat milk when they aggregate those biomarkers from those studies. So there's a little bit of information out there, but really still an active area of research interest there.
Excellent. Toby, anything you want to add, or did Dr. Bolling kind of summarize that pretty?
Yeah, no, Dr. Bolling, I think he got it all covered there.
Excellent. All right. Well, we are at time. There are more questions, so I will send some to the speakers. If you guys don't mind just answering a few of them, we'll send that out in the post-webinar communications. And at this point, thank you again for attending today's webinar. We want to thank both of our speakers and both of our co-sponsors, Maryland Academy of Family Physicians and the New Jersey Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics. At this point, so you will be receiving, let me advance my slide, sorry. You will get post-webinar email communications from us that will lead you to americandairy.com to our webinar library, which you can find the presentation recording, PDF slide deck, information on receiving your continuing education credits. And this will be sent out to you within the week, within 1 week from today. So we'd like to, again, thank you guys both for sharing your time and your knowledge with us. Thanks to the co-sponsors. And just remember, American Dairy Association Northeast, we are here for you as health professionals to provide you with any evidence-based dairy resources that you need, science summaries, research for you and for your clients and your patients. So I definitely encourage you to visit our website at americandairy.com for any additional information you may be looking for. So again, thank you for joining us today. And this now concludes our webinar. Thanks for joining us. Have a great day, everyone.